Welcome to the Bodybuilding Banter Podcast, your number one source of all things bodybuilding. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes. Now, here's your host, Leroy Rollins.
All right, people, welcome to the Bodybuilding Banter Podcast. I'm here with my man, James. James, introduce yourself to the people, let them know what you're all about, and maybe briefly go over what we just talked about in the intro there.
Okay, yeah, so name's James Johnson. My background, I actually only really got into bodybuilding, I think it's like 3 years ago now.
Okay.
But I was always an athlete. Played college soccer, played baseball, got recruited for both, chose soccer when I actually went. But I really didn't start lifting until after all that ended because I was like, all right, what do I do with all my time now?
Yeah, totally.
Got into lifting, became a personal trainer, loved it, kind of got challenged to compete by another personal trainer who had just done physique, and I was like, oh, I could look better than that. Like, I could do that.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. Along that route, I got a degree in biology and then went on and actually just finished my doctorate in physical therapy, which is kind of why we're going to go with the topic that we're going to go with, which is that injury prevention side of things.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, so I've competed twice now. I placed in my first one, I was third in open for classic physique, second in the debut. The guy that won debut won the open as well. And then in my second show, I took second in the open. So nice. I am in peak week now, so hopefully we can get a first place this Saturday. So
right on, man.
All that.
Okay, so before we get into the whole like injury side of things, kind of briefly go over like what your training style has been with classic physique, and what your nutrition strategies have been and that kind of stuff. Because you said to me, anyways, in the intro that you've hired a coach. So how has that kind of directed you?
Mm-hmm. So hiring the coach, I found one that matched my philosophy, and I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. Like I myself am a coach, and I won't take certain clients, or I try not to, if we have very different ideas of what we need to do, because it's just not going to work out. I don't want to take their money if they're going to end up pissed off.
Yeah.
But so I did the same thing. I hired a coach that very similar mindset to me. If it fits your macros, flexible dieting, minimalist approach to cardio, all that kind of stuff, because I'm incredibly busy. Doctorate of physical therapy, just finished grad school, own my own business, personal training on the side, my training, all this stuff. I don't have hours and hours to do cardio.
Yeah, exactly.
So I rely very heavily on the nutrition side of things and keeping that very well regulated to help me with my deficits. I don't have to get the deficit from cardio. That's the big thing. Also using like a minimalist style of training, very much similar to what Jeff Alberts of 3DMJ does. So a couple movements, barbell, dumbbell focused, and really just crush those movements and then get out of the gym, because I don't have 2-3 hours. It's not a lot of a ton of accessory volume and stuff like that. So
what's what's a typical session look like? Say you were going to do like a leg session. What would that kind of entail?
So up until this prep, where I've been having a little bit of back issues, which is funny because I talk about injury prevention. My leg training, at least one of my leg days, because I normally do 2 sessions of each.
Yep.
One of my leg days was always squat, leg extension, leg curl, calf raise, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
So I hit one heavy compound, and I'm doing a decent amount of steps of that.
Yeah.
So one heavy compound, hit one accessory for, quad, one for hamstring, one for calf, and I'm done.
Wow.
So I'm not doing all the, the extra stuff, the hip abduction, extension, the glute thrusts and all that. And they have their time and place, and I use them with my training occasionally. I use them with clients when they need it.
Yep.
But for me, it's just if I feel the movement, and if I can move a decent amount of weight with the movement, I'm going to stick with it, because that's what I can progress with.
Exactly. Now, if you had more time, would you do more? Or do you really enjoy kind of that bare bones, the basics, get in, get out? Or if you had those extra hours in the day, would you spend more time on more accessory stuff?
Probably a little bit more.
Sure.
Just to kind of even things out a little bit. Like if I notice I need a little bit more of tricep work, I'll maybe hit a couple of varieties of tricep to make sure I'm hitting all the different heads of it and stuff like that. But at least for off season, and I actually do it a little bit in my program, where the one day will be very minimalist and very barbell heavy focused.
Yep.
And then the second day, a little more of a pump session where I'm getting a little bit of the fun stuff and a little more variety. But I can interchange when that is depending on my schedule. So I'm very flexible with the training. It's not strict. This is my upper heavy day. This is my lower heavy day. It's what can I do? And I've even within prep switched throughout from a 5-day split to a 3-day split to a 4-day, depending on what my availability is.
Yeah, wow. So what do you find for you has been kind of like optimal, like a upper lower, push pull, legs? How's that kind of
what I've been running for a while, and what my coach has me on now is upper lower.
Yep.
Rest day, and then push-pull legs.
Oh, okay.
And those push-pull legs are more of that, the accessory high-rep type stuff. The upper lower is barbell-focused, heavy movements.
That's actually kind of very, very similar to what I did, except on because I've always been very, like, chest dominant and, like, obviously front delt vicariously through that. So what I did was, like, push-pull legs and then, like, a leg and then kind of shoulders, arms. So very, very similar to what you did, except for obviously not the second chest movement and stuff like that. So that's interesting that we have a similar training style in that way, because I'm kind of similar to you in that, focus on the big stuff, because that's the stuff that's going to yield the most benefit. It's funny now, people overthink it, especially younger athletes. They overthink it, and they're doing reverse grip, upside down lateral raises, and I'm like, just how about shoulder press? How about that? But it's funny.
Yeah, I actually just had a conversation with someone this morning. They were asking me for advice. I was giving it to them. They're like, "Well, I train each body part once a week." I'm like, "Well, okay, so let's increase that because we can split up our volume. You can recover better. Frequency is still kind of in the air for the literature, but I think overall most people that's how they're training,
especially naturals."
Yeah, and I'm walking him through all this stuff, and at the very end, he goes, "So what do you think about Arnold's blueprint to cut?" And I was like, "Oh, like come on, like you don't need the program, the template, all that. Just use the foundations that science has shown to be true, and make your own thing and just follow it." But whatever. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's part of it is like with social media and stuff, because everybody's like, everybody's selling an ebook. And there's like kind of Arnold's blueprint or whatever you just said. Like everybody's got like my secret to big arms or whatever, or the best way to build your shoulders. And it's like people don't know where to look, and they're just overwhelmed by information. It's like slow down a minute, pick something that makes sense, and run with it a bit.
Yeah, and I think the big picture, people worry like, what's the best split? The best split's whatever you can do. I already told you, like, I do 3 different ones. Yeah. Whenever my time, am I getting enough volume? Am I progressing? That's what matters.
Yeah.
Like, however if you want to train caps, delts, forearms, and chest, do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just get enough volume throughout the week.
Yeah, it's, and again, and like I think we all started in that realm. Like when I was younger, of course, it was always like destroyed chest on Monday, and then chest didn't get hit till like Monday again, and like you progressed on it, but at the end of the day, was it the best bet? Maybe not, but that science wasn't out when I was 16 years old, right? It was whatever you found on bodybuilding.com. You just typed in chest workouts and you did that for a couple weeks, and then you're like, all right, new chest workout. But now, like, there's guys like the 3DMJ crew and like Brad Schoenfeld and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, these guys are putting out like the science behind it, right? Like, it's not just because Ronnie Coleman did this chest workout. Like, let's look at it a little bit more intelligently,
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that completely.
So touch on, obviously you said a little bit about kind of minimal cardio. So talk to me about that a little bit, because that to me, just from my competitive career, has never been something I've been afforded the luxury of. So talk to me about that a little bit. Like, do you have to eat a lot less to account for that, or like tell me about that a little bit?
Yeah. And I think I'm correcting some of those habits now with this new coach, because like the first thing he did was increase calories, increase carbs. Because when I was growing up, it's hard for me. Like, I didn't eat much, and it wasn't like a choice or anything. It was just never really planned into the meals, and like even when I got to college in the summers, I was working manual jobs and then going and training and doing all this stuff where I would just eat like one meal a day.
Yeah, and you're burning so many calories.
Doing an OMAD diet, it's just, you know, I woke up, I went to work, I went to the gym, I got home and I ate, you know, a meal.
Yeah.
So I'm used to not eating that many calories, and I think there's all, you know, it's wishy-washy on the science of like metabolic slowing and all that kind of stuff. But I truly think that like I can just get by on lower calories than most people because I've done that for so long.
Oh yeah, so you would adapt to that with anything, right? I could get behind that. That would make sense, especially if you've done it for years and years and years. Like, of course, your body's going to be like, all right, guy doesn't need it.
There were points in this prep where, you know, 1,500 calories, and I was fine with that. You know,
wow.
I'm up now eating like 2,000.
Yeah.
And that to me was like, holy shit, I'm eating 2,000 calories. Like what? And I'm like maintaining this weight or losing this weight. I've looked into a little bit. I've actually posted on a couple social media sites and stuff about Lyle McDonald's research on the aggressive diet approach, where some of the idea of how much lean muscle mass we lose during a dieting phase is a little overhyped and a little fearful, because we're not even sure if the lean muscle mass or lean tissue we're losing is muscle mass. There's some hypothesis of, is it structural components to the lean tissue and not actually the contractile tissue itself? That's still up in the air. But if you look at, you know, your body, if you're eating 250 grams of protein a day, training hard, you're giving all the stimulus to build muscle. Just because you're in a deficit doesn't mean that your muscle is going to go away like that. So use a gradient where you use a really, really heavy deficit right in the beginning when you have all this fat that's there. Your body's going to use that fat up to a certain point. And then you kind of taper your deficit as you get leaner and leaner and leaner. So that's what I've always tried to do, where I'm like, I'll cut 1,000 calories out immediately sometimes and just go with it until I start to feel the effects of it, and then kind of reverse myself a little bit and then taper back down. All again, because I don't want to use that cardio. Like I could use cardio more as a tool. I just tend not to.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Like if you're, you know, for me, for example, I'm now like 30 plus pounds over stage weight. Like if I all of a sudden cut right away, there's, you know, 15 pounds of fat that could probably go relatively quickly before I got into like the depths of it. So that's pretty interesting. That's super cool. Yeah.
Maybe not a long-term the race approach, but if you are short on time, which I was for the prep, I kind of rushed into it. It worked. It got me to stage at the percentage I needed to.
Yep.
Mentally, it wasn't great. Psychologically, it wasn't great. That's why I'm kind of really happy where I am now, because I've kind of fixed some of those issues now that I have more time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sweet. That's cool. All right, let's get into probably the meat and potatoes of this podcast, and that's injury prevention, common things that, you know, you see and how you address them and that kind of stuff. So talk to me a little bit about what's like the top 3 things you see, and let's go bodybuilding because that's kind of where we are. Let's go the top like 3 things you see in most bodybuilders, guys, you know, what they complain about and that good stuff.
Yeah, so it's actually perfect because I wrote down 3 perfect examples for that.
Perfect.
So the big 3 that I see all the time, and you probably see it on forums, social media, anything like this. Everyone has a shoulder issue, everyone has a low back issue, and everyone has a knee issue.
Dude, you know what? I have all those 3 right now, and that's awesome.
But here's the funny thing. When you look at the actual statistics for weightlifting, the prevalence of injury, bodybuilding is actually a very low percentage of time loss injury because we're smart enough to adapt our training to continue doing it. So I actually wrote down some numbers. If you look at, this is injuries per 100 hours.
Okay.
So rugby players, 1.92 injuries for 100 hours compared to weightlifting, and that's, you know, just generalized weightlifting. It excludes Olympic lifting and it excludes powerlifting in this study.
Okay.
0.0017 injuries per 100 hours.
Yeah.
So that means rugby, you're 1,129 times more likely to be injured. Now, obviously, there's guys slipping into you in rugby, which doesn't happen in the weight room often.
Yeah. But it happens.
But I mean, it's a repetitive motion over and over and over. So likely, I mean, you're going to get an injury occasionally. and it's normally that low back, the shoulder, or the knee, because those are the most mobile of the joints.
Okay.
And they're the most tactic of the joints with loading. Now, obviously, my fingers are more mobile than my spine in general, but the actual axial compression,
yeah, they're not taking the load,
is minimal compared to like the spine, the shoulder, or the knee.
Yeah.
So that's what's most common, and obviously there's tons of different diagnoses within that. Everyone thinks they have a rotator cuff tear or shoulder impingement, where it's, impingement is a broad diagnosis.
Yeah.
Too many people throw it around like, oh, I have impingement, and it's this exact one thing. Impingement really is just what's happening in the shoulder. It's not what's the cause of that happening.
No, yeah.
I try to teach that a lot to people. So normally it's the supraspinatus rubbing on the AC joint or the acromion, which makes up the AC joint. But why is that? What is causing the scapula to be in such a position where you're getting rubbing? Is it a genetic factor? Is your acromion differently shaped, which we do find is common? Do you have irritation and inflammation in the supraspinatus because you're lifting improperly and you're putting strain on the muscle? Or are you weak in other areas? And this is one that a lot of people overlook. The lower trap helps to reposition the scapula in such a way to kind of open up that space.
Okay.
But how many people train their lower trap versus, upper trap, the chest, and all these things that are going to pull you into a rounded position, which is going to put you into more impingement. So you can, I see it all the time. You get a, big American football linebacker, can rep for days. You get them to do like a Y, prone, shoulder elevation to target the lower trap. They can't do it. I know personally for a while I couldn't do it because, I was overlooking some of this training. And that's where the injury prevention side of training comes into play, specifically with physical therapy. It's looking at the weak points in the body and addressing them specifically. You can be strong one way, and just because you're strong on the squat or strong on the deadlift doesn't mean you're not setting yourself up for failure down the road because compensating or doing things in a different manner than you need to.
Intense. Okay, so you kind of talked about shoulder a little bit, but what I want to do is actually kind of dive into all three of these, I think, and just kind of rip them apart a little bit. So with the shoulder in mind, what's the cause of all our pain? For we'll broaden the term a little bit, because obviously you can't be like, okay, this is the reason everybody's shoulders hurt, but we're rounded. Okay, so why is that, right? Like, we do a lot of chest. That's probably a big cause of it, right? But kind of dive into that a little bit more. So what is causing bodybuilders' shoulders to hurt a lot of the time?
I'll preface this by saying I have a doctorate in physical therapy, but I'm a grad. I'm not an expert in the field, and there are many more qualified people to talk about this. But in my opinion, based on my education, my experience,
Perfect.
I think it comes down to a multitude of things. The chest tightness being one of them.
Yep.
Way too many people overemphasize chest because that's huge in bodybuilding. You end up with the rounded shoulders, and then you're closing down the space for that supraspinatus to get irritated.
Yep.
So working on some chest opening mobility movements, stretch the pec major, the pec minor. There's a lot of different ways to approach that. So that's one mobility aspect.
Yep.
A second mobility aspect is actually upper thoracic, so the upper spine mobility. You'll find a lot of people really stiff, specifically in rotation and extension, getting your shoulders back. And if you can't get the shoulders, if you can't get the spine to extend, you're going to have to get that motion from somewhere else, and it's going to come from the shoulder. So it's the theory of regional interdependence. Pretty much if we look at the body as one big system, if one area of the system isn't working properly, another area has to make up for it.
Yep.
So if we're stiff in one area, we have to become more loose in another area because the body's going to do whatever it needs to do to get the job done.
Right.
So if I'm stiff in the upper back, shoulders become more mobile to compensate so I can do my presses, my rows, my overhead stuff, all that. And then it just creates wear and tear and strain because it's not a smooth, efficient system. And then it comes back again to some of that periscapular strengthening. So everyone wants to go into the internal, external rotations and all that. I would more focus on the serratus anterior and the lower trap.
Right.
Serratus anterior and lower trap work together to help upwardly rotate the scapula, because we know if my arm's coming up, my humerus is moving, but I need my scapula to move with it. So there's something called scapular-humeral rhythm. And I need those two to work together to get that full elevation. If I don't, you actually cause impingement as well. Because if you think about, right here, scapula, humerus, if I come up, and this isn't moving, I'm going to butt against that right there. Need them to come together to get that full rotation. So it's a coordination of muscular movements. So training the serratus anteriors, training the lower trap, still working the internal external rotators as well, because they're important, but I think a little overemphasized.
Interesting. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about before we move on to like lower back stuff, how would one program stuff for their shoulders while still wanting to get, that bodybuilding volume in?
Definitely. So I use it as a dynamic warm-up.
Sure.
If I have a dynamic warm-up for my lower body and a dynamic warm-up for my upper body, it's got to be something, you don't train the rotator cuff heavy. I actually saw recently, and I quickly corrected them. They were doing like internal and external rotation with the cable column, doing like 4x8. That's terrifying to me.
I've seen that too. I saw a guy do, he had the dumb elbow on his knee with like a 35. And I'm like, No,
these are small muscles. They are sensitive muscles, and they need to be trained in a high rep area. Yeah. So like sets of 12, 15, because really what you're doing, you're trying to get a little pre-activation. It's not like we're technically really trying to hypertrophy those muscles, because if you think about it, if you hypertrophy the supraspinatus that already doesn't have much area to go through that canal, you're just closing that space more. So really just get a little activation to help get yourself in a better position. So do it before your upper body workout, and do it before your lower body workout for the lower body dynamic stuff. But if it's a mobility issue, train the mobility after the workout. And I think this is more common knowledge now, but a lot of literature has been put out where static stretching prior to lifting decreases power output. Dynamic warm-up prior to lifting increases power output. So I don't want to decrease my power by static stretching before I go do high volume, high intensity benching or head press or whatever. So if I need to work on, say, internal rotation of the shoulder to help kind of create a little bit more even mobility throughout the shoulder, which is something a lot of people probably need to do. I'm going to do that afterwards.
Right. Sweet. So, all right. Okay, shoulder checked off. Let's go low back now. That one probably plagues a lot of us. Everybody's got low back pain. So talk to me about, what could it be from? What's common in us bodybuilding folk? Yeah.
So we do a lot of axial loading. We put a lot of stress on the low back, whether it's, deadlifting, overhead pressing, squatting, even unsupported rowing. All that can add up to a ton of stress on the low back, because it's working, either it's being compressed or it's working to cause anti-rotation at the pelvis. So what I will say is, while I don't want to throw one diagnosis out there, the diagnosis doesn't necessarily matter. And this is kind of controversial even in the physical therapy world right now, but I wrote down some literature because this is something that I truly believe in. The first thing that people do when they have a low back issue is they go to the physician. The physician tells them to rest, take ibuprofen, whatever. They feel fine. They go back, they lift, they get the pain, they go back, and they're like, all right, let's do an MRI. In the physical therapy world, that MRI doesn't matter.
Right.
And I'm speaking broadly, and I know there are people that are probably going to disagree with that. But what does that image tell us? Well, it's a still image. We know that we're not staying still, we're moving. So what is that, bulge or whatever doing when we're moving? On top of the idea that there's been plenty of literature, and I'm going to quote some numbers here, where they did imaging on individuals who are asymptomatic. No issues whatsoever, no back pain, no leg pain, nothing.
They're good.
37% of 20-year-olds had some sort of spinal disc degeneration.
Wow.
96% of 80-year-olds had some sort of spinal disc degeneration. And they had no symptoms. So the image doesn't necessarily tell us if we're going to have some sort of tissue disc sensitivity. There's so many people day to day that go around with, you know, if you looked at the imaging, holy crap, they've got a herniated disc, 3 bulging disc protrusion here.
Yeah.
How are you walking? And then they're terrified to do anything.
Yeah.
But they don't have symptoms.
They don't feel a thing.
So it's the resiliency that we build up within our tissues, and by continuing to stay active. There's 2 quotes that I always throw out to my patients, and they're from the same professor, and I doubt she'll ever watch this, but if she does, thank you for these. So I look at disc degeneration as wrinkles on the inside. Just as we age, we get wrinkles on the outside, our skin starts to get, you know, slightly less, I'm going to use the word plump, I hate that word, but it's the